I'm a guy that stutters a lot,
Hey man, you're the
so
smartest squirrel I've ever met.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, so like the whole conversation around like how you can it's hard for people to like look at things on equal footing, or you approach it from, I don't know what basically, I guess where I'm at with the fandom is our fandom is extremely diverse, right? Just due to the circumstances around the media, the nature of the media. Like, it's 70 years old, Godzilla. There's a whole slew of American history. There's a whole slew of Japanese history. And so I think almost naturally there are these pockets that people will fit into, right? Like, maybe you only care about the Showa era Japanese stuff. For some of the younger fans, like, maybe you vibe more with the MonsterVerse stuff because that's what you grew up with. And so almost in the nature of the media form, you're going to have these different sects. So I think that's almost entirely unavoidable. But then the problem comes in is like when these two different sects just don't know how to talk to one another, right? Like, the MonsterVerse younger crowd says, like, how could you like those older Showa movies? It's just people in deteriorating rubber suits fighting like mascots at a ball game. Like, what is there to be enjoyed, right? And then you could just as easily have this older crowd come back to the MonsterVerse folks and say, yeah, well, all of your creatures are digital. They've never even existed in the real world. Like, that's soulless. How could you enjoy that stuff? So, and I don't know like what percentage, what fraction of the communities are actually composed of people like this. I like to believe that it's a vocal minority and that most of us are capable of getting along and having productive conversations, but it's in these like small minorities, these loud people where like the worst personalities of the fandom come out, and we sort of all get brushstroked as part of it.
Well, there are several YouTubers that try to be analytical, and there are some good ones. And I've talked to a couple of them, and I've mentioned them before, right before this. And like Blotswave, he's a really nice guy. And his favorite, I'll, hopefully he's fine with me saying this. His favorite Godzilla movie is The Planet Eater, but he doesn't want to talk about it because about how like contested that film is and just the anime trilogy as a whole.
Right.
And like he finds a lot about that film that maybe others don't see or he just disagrees with. And the whole thing is that there's just always this, it's always someone's prerogative for like their own agenda, because it's always like Godzilla cannot be a hero, he cannot be the savior or stuff or a hero and blah, blah, like stuff like that. Can like Godzilla MonsterVerse is bad because they say he's a hero, but he destroys and kills people in the process. Therefore, it's bad. And like they're kind of going about it and doing it in a black and white way, and they're removing context just so their point can fit. So they'll say they'll describe Godzilla in the same manner as GMK Godzilla, who intentionally destroys stuff, like because their favorites are Shin Godzilla or 54 or -1 or GMK, because those are the ones where Godzilla is villainized.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, we can't. Godzilla can't be anything else, or like you can't have an interpretation and have the story and context be different. It's because my favorite is like that, and he's a giant monster. His existence means blah 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 blah. Therefore, there can't be any other gray area for all this, or any argument or explanation as to why it's like that. And that's just so frustrating to see that. And especially when people like say, oh, this movie is bad, or this movie blah 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 is doing this, and there are examples, and when they show it, it's like it's really embarrassing, because I can tell when someone either didn't watch the movie or they just didn't pay attention. And I don't know which one is worse, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's very because even if it's a small minority, like vocal minority for this stuff, but some of these videos do get thousands of views, like not like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but it's enough to where you can get that ball rolling. Because for the longest time, I know the Cinemassacre, who most people associate with Angry Video Game Nerd, but a lot of Godzilla fans also know him because of James Rolfe's Godzilla-thon. Like, he always had these opinions that are always like parroted over and over again. Like, 1998 would have been good if it was just called The Beast of 20,000 Fathoms. Like, would the movie have been any different if it wasn't called Godzilla? Like, were all your problems just because it didn't look the way you wanted it to, or like he didn't act the way he did for you? I'm like, fair enough if you thought that, but everyone is like, are all the other problems from the movie or anything else changed because of that?
Right.
And a few years ago, like 2019, it started. There was this whole thing about how actually the Heisei films are really bad and blah 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 blah. Like, Miki Sakusa is a terrible character. Why? How could she defend Godzilla and
Yeah.
stuff? And they're missing the context, and they'll use scenes from the dub, which is hilariously inaccurate, because I went and took a scene that was very scrutinized from Space Godzilla and asked someone to translate it, the Japanese audio, and it was completely different from what the dub was. Like, it wasn't even talking about Godzilla and stuff. It was like, oh, Godzilla has feelings, and it wasn't about that.
Yeah.
And they're also missing the context in like earlier in the movie. Is like, Mothra's twin fairies say Godzilla is the only way to defend the Earth from monsters like Space Godzilla. So Miki Sakusa is in a place where she can't really like convince the world. Like, she's still there at trying to stop him and everything. It's not that she's emotional about Godzilla. It's emotional because she has to take care of Godzilla Jr., who is not aggressive and is just friendly, like, and stuff like that. So whenever they do that, it's like, oh, the 84 and Biolante are the good ones and everything else sucked because of blah 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 story, blah blah blah. And they ignore any of the context or nuance to that stuff because they don't like the movies, and they just can't find any other way to display why they don't like it. Maybe because they have to make it so condemning of whatever they don't like. And that just like very, I don't know what the word is, it's just very harmful to discussion, especially when you're like spreading misinformation about stuff, especially behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's harmful to like the state of discourse, I would say, right? I think so. There's a couple different points that you've brought up that I think are like worth discussing. The first is that people really like to start at their conclusions and then work backwards to find the evidence. It's like they want to say that this movie is terrible, and then you ask them why, and then they have to kind of work backwards. It's like, oh, because of this, because of this, because of this, rather than like experiencing something, looking at evidence for something, and then eventually coming to a conclusion. And I think it's due in part to the second point that you've brought up, that like people just really like to get onto bandwagons. And I don't know if it's just like people want to feel like they're part of something. They want to feel included as part of a group. Because like we know, like social science tells us that once you hit like the age of 10, prepubescent, prepuberty, like you start to crave social acceptance from your peers. And I don't know if it's just that the crowd who shits on this stuff is louder, and so people feel more drawn to them and people want to join in and be like, oh yeah, this thing is terrible. It's really, really frustrating. And on the nuance piece, I feel like we are currently living in a moment of time where nuance and thoughtfulness is almost punished, in the sense that like we live in like the TikTok, YouTube short, Instagram reel generation, or at least in this moment of time, where everything is meant to like keep you engaged, keep you engaged, keep you engaged, keep watching. Don't think, just keep watching, keep watching, keep watching. And so it's almost like we're being conditioned to not have thoughtful conversations. It's just that we want whatever we are doing in the moment to be resolved so that we can immediately move to the next thing. And there's, like you said, there's a lot of harm in that because of how much thought and detail are put into these things. Like before we started recording, we were just talking about all the small gestures in GXK with Zuko and Kong, and how you can feel Scar King's presence and his impact on the other characters before you even meet him if you pay attention to Zuko's movements, right? For somebody who like thoughtfully watches that movie, maybe they'll pick up on it like you did. But for the person who's got the movie on in the background, not really paying attention, it's like, oh, where's the fights? Where's all this other stuff? Like they're going to miss that entirely. And somebody went through the trouble of making sure that these things were in the film, and it's just gone, you know?
Yeah. And one of the most contentious and controversial subjects ever in the fandom, and just like in general, because it went on to CNN all the way back in 1991, was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah with the whole nationalist controversy.
Yes.
hmm And I discovered a live stream or an interview that I forgot some people, but I know who they are. They interviewed the director and writer for the movie, who also did Biolante.
Right.
And this was like a year before his passing. And he explained that that wasn't actually the case. He was actually, because it was like the whole like, everyone thinks like Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is supposed to be imperial nationalism, but that was not at all what he intended. He was actually supposed to say that the Americans were trying to stop nationalism from happening again, which is the villains. But they're, of course, they're the villains because genocide of all of Japan using King Ghidorah. So that way, that future where Japan is like owning most of the country is obviously a bad idea.
Right.
And they also miss the context, because he also explains, which I also did research on, that Japan in the 80s was very prosperous and like getting, I don't know if the word is wealthy, but they were, their stocks and stuff, like they were doing really good. And that was one of the inspirations as to why that whole plot was in the movie. And people either don't know that, or they just didn't research or know the intentions of that. So to this day, you still have people who don't like the movie will throw in that it's one of the worst movies because it's supposed to be nationalistic, when that's not even what the author intended. In fact, when I watched the movie, despite it not like being written the best, it's I never got that from it, because you can obviously have villains that have like intentions that seem good, but they go about it the whole wrong way.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't understand that. It's like, yeah, they can have a point and everything. Like there is like something wrong with something, and obviously genocide is bad. Bottom text.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because like King Ghidorah 91 is the first movie I ever watched when I was like 5 years old. And when I was talking to Donnie Winter, he was like, well, that's quite a heavy movie to watch when you're 5 years old. I was like, yeah, but like I didn't understand what was happening. It was just big monsters, you know?
Yeah.
But revisiting it as an adult, like, yeah, there are like some pretty major themes going on there. But I never took the film as Japanese nationalistic. And like, if anything, I don't remember the woman from the future. I don't remember what her name was, but she was trying to stop that from happening, wasn't she? Like she was trying to stop
like at first she was on board, but then like the more they went on, she decided to not do that.
Right.
Like she switched sides.
Yeah. So like I don't know how you watch that movie in good faith and come to that conclusion, you know?
Maybe they just, because of the circumstances, because the Godzillasaurus doesn't attack the Japanese army in World
Mm-hmm.
War II, and that's saying, and he's only attacking the Americans, and he's like inadvertently saving them. Like, oh, like, and they show him as a hero and everything because the whole cast is Japanese and everything. And the villains are trying to stop Japan from being a super country in the future. So we got to stop them and everything. And they don't really read in between the lines and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just because movie they just didn't think the movie was well nuanced or written, but I never got that. I feel like one of the most profound moments in the franchise happens to be that businessman Shindo and Godzilla looking at each other when they see each other again for the first time
Mm-hmm.
in like decades.
Yes.
And like Godzilla, you see Godzilla getting emotional because he remembers him, and Shindo, like, he accepts that he's going to die, and Godzilla roars and then kills him
Yes.
because he doesn't recognize that he thanked him and everything. So it's also kind of ironic in a sense that he just comes back only to kill him. So
Yeah. Yeah. I really need to watch that movie again. It's a shame that the Blu-ray is like
they have
fucking
it on
terrible.
HBO or Max. They have it on Max now,
Okay. I may have to VPN it.
or it's on Criterion, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, it's been a hot minute, and I feel like there's a level of appreciation. I haven't seen it in over 10 years. So I think there's a level of appreciation I could definitely stand to gain from watching it more at this point in my life.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like I need to do a video on that. Finally, like clearing the air about that because that's just a thing that needs to die
Yes.
with a lot of things, and that just bothers me is because some people will have this type of influence, and like it's kind of scary if like nobody says anything or like contests to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just going to run rampant, and that's why I want to like look at these points and see if they're doing it in good faith or if they have any incorrect information. Like it is important to like take it, like not try to attack them or attack them personally and everything, but there's also people just won't take criticism and will just blame everyone else but themselves for not getting it something right or like being called out on something of hypocrisy
Yeah.
or something like that. And that's happened multiple times, and it's just kind of beating a dead horse because that's been a thing in discussions ever since Godzilla minus one came out. And then you got all these, you know, YouTubers that aren't into the Godzilla franchise, but because of minus one and it's like a hot debate or like hot topic, they'll make videos about it because Godzilla minus one is a very uh
It's
subject
very
matter heavy film, and
yes.
monsterverse films aren't necessarily like that, especially in the newer ones. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone will see that as inferior, which that shouldn't be the case. It's like you can have preferences, but this because something is more complex doesn't make it better.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just really quickly replying to a work message. The point you said around like speaking up. Um, there was something else that was going on in a different community about a month ago, and this one dude was getting like lots of flack because he collaborated with a really controversial creator, but he basically issued a statement where he was like, look, if I feel like somebody is putting out misinformation or harmful sentiments, then unless somebody speaks up against it, like that will be the prevailing narrative. And that's why I decided to speak up, and I worked with this other creator. I just had a they just had a conversation, which is the crazy bit. They were like, "How could you have a conversation with this person?" And the guy was like, "I had a conversation with him because that misinformation needed correcting, and like if nobody else did it, then that would just be what people remember, and so that's why I did it." So yeah, man, like I would love to see you do a G91 video setting the record straight, and providing evidence for why like some of these quotes that are getting thrown around are either incorrect or perhaps missing that nuance that's needed.
Hmm. And some people that are detractors of even Shin minus one think they're nationalist for some reason. This when they throw out these claims, like, "Oh, the buildings, the infrastructure of Japan is what's important." Then I just say, well, and not, I just say, okay, well, why are they sacrificing the buildings and Shin Godzilla at the end to topple him over? And they're trying their best to minimize casualties, and they use drones to have him attack so that he can lose all his energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, they're saying in minus one that it's okay to be a suicide pilot if you're doing it for a noble cause or something like that. And like that's not at all what's they're trying to say. In fact, they go against that multiple times, and they're going against the country. They're criticizing it heavily. Like even I showed my grandma, who's over 80 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and she was surprised at how much they would criticize themselves that much.
Mm-hmm.
Because, GMK was a movie that was talking about how much Japan wants to forget about its atrocities in World War II.
Yes.
And that's seemingly still a problem in Japan where they don't want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they can think that, especially when it's said out loud. And that's something that I hate from a lot of people. Is like, oh, you just don't like that they're throwing out legitimate criticism. It's like, no, they're not. Like when they say that the red light is green and it's red, and I can show them that, and they're like, no.
Yeah. No, I got some of those comments when I reviewed minus one as well. They were like, "Oh, it's just like a nationalistic piece of media," and I was like, "What exactly about this movie leads you to think that?" And they replied with one word, and that word was kamikaze. And then I think I tweeted out, I was like, "Fellas, is it nationalistic to not want to die?"
Hmm. Just because they're talking about kamikaze, and it seems like he's going to kamikaze, even though they show 10 seconds later that he doesn't kamikaze, and like they show that the guy that blamed him for everything tells him to live.
Yes.
Do
Like,
people just not, they just block that out of their minds when they're like, I don't like this, so I'm going to use something that makes it seem what the word defamatory or
a, de-
defamation.
a de- def- defaming.
Yeah, they want to defame something. They can't like say I don't like it because like it's not for me, or like I just didn't think it was that impactful for me, or I
Yeah.
just didn't like the characters, I didn't like the story, or what have you. They have to make it like this is an abomination, and if you like it, you're an idiot, and
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah.
Especially there was like a YouTuber, a YouTuber that made like I don't know how long of a video, but on GXK, but when people pointed out when he was calling the Asian cast of the movie Indians, like, oh, you're just Monsterverse fans and you're all R word slurs.
Oh, fun. That's great, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Oh,
then people who genuinely agree with Dr. Skipper's video think that he actually was like had correct points about like Monsterverse Godzilla and all that stuff. Like, oh, this guy's based. Like he's telling the correct truth. Just because they don't like the movie.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I mean, right? It's like this epidemic of start with your conclusion, work backwards. Like if you start with the conclusion, that -1 is a nationalistic film, and then you work backwards to suggest that there are kamikaze pilots in the film, and you completely ignore the emotional climax of the film where Tachibana redeems Shikishima. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you could do that. You could come to that conclusion. You could find that evidence if you just omit this gigantic lingering message of the film.
But as soon as you try to point that out, it's like, oh, you just don't want anyone to criticize your movie. I'm fully aware that people are going to like and dislike stuff that I like and dislike. That's fine. I'm just going to disagree and just move on with my day as long as they're respectful.
Mm-hmm.
That's like if they, it's all fair and game if it's like, you know, coming from a fair place of heart. And that's not what a lot of YouTubers do, even in the Godzilla community, because some Godzilla fans are like that, where they're just kind of happy that the Venom is kind of divided because of how diverse it is, and that just makes me really upset as a per.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like you see this. You see this in both, like the. I like to think of Godzilla fandom as sort of split down the middle of like movie stuff and then like collectible stuff, but I would say
Mm-hmm.
like in both instances, there are people that hang their hats on like this never-ending cycle of negativity because it draws in the views, it draws in the engagement. Like Dr. Skipper's video, I don't think I've read a single positive comment in that section, and yet it's got like what, like 500,000 views. Like he's made what is it? It's like $3 per thousand. Like he's made like $2,000 off that video
Mm-hmm.
because of how negative it is.
And he's, despite knowing that all this misinformation and that he responded to it, he still keeps it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even in his subsequent videos, like his pinned comment is just him saying like something Godzilla. Like he's aware. He's very self-aware about it.
Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, stop talking about Dr. Skipper was just the big one. People multiple times. I know you made a video. There was this one YouTuber that does Pokemon, and apparently he does research every single time on all his stuff for his topics, but not Godzilla.
Yeah, I posted a video about it.
Mm-hmm. There are multiple YouTube videos in the past year that are just like the same thing, misinformation, like lacking context, and it's always -1 and 54, maybe Shin, and if you're like a very underground guy, GMK, but most people think that Showa to MonsterVerse is the only things. Like they'll say those are the only good ones,
Yeah.
and everything else sucks. There's nothing to them because they're silly and they're goofy and like they're brain rot,
Mm-hmm.
and that just depresses me.
Yeah. Well, I think
Because Godzilla for the longest time and to this day still is, even in the fandom, is like, oh, why are you negative about the movie? The humans are supposed to be bad. That was a huge criticism or like a huge defense for like Godzilla King of the Monsters and all this other stuff.
yeah.
When those movies had like mixed negative reactions from movie critics and stuff. Like that was the defenses that they were giving, and I just hate those perceptions, not receptions, perceptions that keep being repeated over and over and over again. Like it's not healthy,
Yeah.
and
I
we're
mean,
still having this to this day. It just evolved in a way where people think that they're talking like they're intellectual, but behind it is just disguised as a bunch of lies
yes.
and things that will make people who don't think twice about it when they're listening to something, especially if that person is like has a lot of edits flashing back and forth because of the ADHD brain to make you not think about it.
See, like that's what I'm talking about, right? Like we live in a time that incentivizes like just rapid media consumption. the person that Kaiju Kim made the video about, what is her name again? Is it Alyssa?
Alyssa Goji Geek.
So Alyssa Goji Geek, in one of her posts, said something that I thought was so true, and it was that once you venture outside the realm of Godzilla collectibles into Godzilla as a media form, you run the risk of running into pseudo intellectualism. And I was like, wow, that is a really concise way to like summarize like this epidemic of people who come in like wrecking balls and think that they know everything they're talking about. And I remember when you, me, and Mike started getting attention for using the word grifter by Zim. And it was just like what else do you call these people? They
I
have
guess
no
tourist,
business.
because
Sure.
because he was. I'm I guess I'm friendly with Zim. Like we have our back and forths, but I guess he still uses that to his live streams to this day. But I guess like he just thinks like the word grifter isn't in definition because he's like, oh, you're getting money or something from it. And I guess some of them are, but some of them aren't. But
They're
it's
trying
more
to.
tour. Yeah, well, it's tourism. Like it's just bad faith tourism
Yeah.
for all these. And I think it's worse when this stuff is coming from quote unquote Godzilla fans that keep sticking around to do that.
Yes.
And it just that doesn't make it anything any better.
No, I definitely agree with that.
And I even would say with the whole collecting thing, like it's seeped into that as well because we have the whole. It was like NECA versus Monster Arts for a while, but it wasn't as bad as it is with Haya versus
No.
Monster Arts.
No, I'm just glad that now that High is here, the the magnifying glass is like no longer on Super 7.
Oh yeah,
And now it's Haya versus Monster Arts, because like Super 7 was getting dragged into conversations that they had no business being in, and I'm just kind of glad it's moved on. Apparently though, it used to be really bad. It used to be like Bandai versus Trendmasters.
really? I wasn't
So
there for that.
yeah, well, neither was I. But yeah, my friend who he's been on the channel a couple times, like he's been around the block, and he's like, it has always happened. It's always been this way. People will always find two different companies to throw at each other, and like just divide themselves.
And they just don't realize that they're working for the same thing.
Yes.
Especially when they're under Toho. It's like, oh, we gotta stop the MonsterVerse. We gotta stop them from making movies. And like, you do realize Toho's, but like profiting from both at the end of the day. They're the ones that they're the reason why this stuff exists in the first place. MonsterVerse is the reason why we're still getting funded all this new stuff that we never got in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even in the 2010s, it wasn't as big as it is now.
Yes, like the MonsterVerse has been undoubtedly a net positive for even the classic Toho fan. And
especially when we get those anniversary films, like I've spoken about how terrible they've been about like quote unquote releasing them and everything, but I guess they're getting them Blu-ray and everything, but like they were hiding them for years, like well, you can have it, watch it for a week, and then they're gone and everything. And like their last three were Kickstarter, so it was like they're taking money and then running away with it. So
yes,
but I guess at the end of the day, I guess now that people can watch them if you get that Blu-ray or something, or if you know where to look. And like people are getting a bunch of classic stuff. We get stuff for kids like Godziban and Chibi Godzilla. I know people are like they want a video game and stuff, but I guess there's still options available. But
for sure,
I don't want to say people are ungrateful because like, oh, there's not enough stuff. Like I have to wait to hear about the Monarch show and the GXK sequel and -1, 2 or -2, and like that's it. It's like you guys had nothing for a decade. Like you at best you had Godzilla Unleashed in 2007, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's that we need to say that it's ingratitude, But I think I
Like, I know
definitely
people are
think,
going to say like, "Oh, this is garbage stuff. Why do I have to be grateful for all this garbage?" Like, okay, if you don't like it, I guess. But at the same time, it's just there's more opportunities now more than ever for stuff like that to get made that you do like.
yeah, and so this was the point I was trying to make. We don't have to go into ingratitude, but the people's inability to just walk away from stuff that is not for them, that they don't particularly like, without needing to like degrade it.
And that's what I was trying to make a point on one time, but I just wasn't ready to talk about it. But I wanted to like say that even if you don't like the later MonsterVerse films, I was at talking to someone's like, "Are you happy that at least they are getting new projects out there and new fans and stuff that are come to appreciate the franchise as a whole?" And I guess I didn't really because I wasn't prepared to like talk about it that way, so
Mm-hmm.
it didn't come off that way, and so they kind of trashed on me for it. It's like, oh, but well, it's a bad movie and stuff like that. So I was like, I don't care if it's if everything that comes out there is just a mountain of trash, and it's like I know that I've done the same thing with Star Wars. Like I don't care about Star Wars anymore. I still love the movies and shows that I do. I
Mm-hmm.
just left it because I don't like the stuff that's being put out, and I don't like the fandom. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So if you're it's like I gotta complain that not everything is good anymore, then like do yourself a favor and leave. It's like you don't
Yeah.
have to be here.
Yeah.
Like, well, I want everything to be good. The thing I love, I want it to be good and everything. It's like not everything lasts forever. It's like I'm at some point maybe God's everything Godzilla that comes out I hate, but just because I that stuff sucks doesn't mean the stuff that I love isn't there. Like it
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, this is just fictional media.
Yep.
Like you can go and find something else that you like. Sure, you can still talk about this stuff, but it's not healthy
Mm-hmm.
and it does nothing and it only ruins the people who are still into it. It only your whole attitude, especially when you're going at it with bad faith, is only making things worse for them. And
Mm-hmm.
going forward, when people want to get into it, that ultimately hurts everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. I've got about 15 minutes before I got to get ready for my next meeting. Did you want to touch on the stuff that happened with Unknowingly at all?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can actually make this a video. I don't know. You can cut it up and stuff. I'd be fine with it. But the whole unknowingly thing, I know beforehand, the first time before he was attacked, it was like maybe a week or so ago. Like I felt uneasy about like the whole man in the suit thing because everyone was like complaining, oh, he's using Haruo Nakajima. It's like, well, he didn't use Haruo Nakajima. I just thought it was a bit weird because the whole subject matter was a bit odd.
Mm-hmm.
And they did use the King Kong suit actor's real name. I forgot. I don't know how to pronounce it. Shorichi Hosei or something like that
Okay.
in the King Kong video.
Mm-hmm.
And like some things he got wrong. Like he said like there's a Mothra suit that's not accurate. There wasn't any Mothra suit for Mothra vs. Godzilla. It was a puppet
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. But I guess you could say alternate reality. It just kind of was a bit odd that he would use real life stuff
Yeah.
and like he would get some things wrong. It just kind of felt uneasy. But someone told me that that's not the intention.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess someone, I don't recall who, so I'm not going to say anything about who did it, but apparently they did a Patreon reviewing it. I guess they didn't like the man in the suit. And then those people started attacking him. And then that's when the first instance happened. I believe it was in 2023. And then I guess MatPat went up on it and like he made his own video before he quit
Yeah.
and everything.
Yes.
And now I guess it's still happening to this day, and like I guess people made quote unquote accusations about him that are just stupid, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, and I guess he canceled it because of the whole toxicity thing, and then a bunch of stuff happened, and then like he tried to attempted to take his own life
Yeah.
again, and he went to the hospital, and people were like, doubting it because like they thought people were saying, "Oh, it's the boy who cried wolf thing," because
Mm-hmm.
he's done this before. And
Yeah.
I just think this is a 15-year-old kid. Like, even if you think that this is some sort of situation like that, this is serious, especially considering their age. Like, even if they came out with it, you still shouldn't like take it like that, especially if you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When it and it just says so much. But I'm glad they're okay,
Yeah.
and that they are just fine with people now. But they're just don't want to deal anything with the man of the suit now. That's just canceled, and I know people are happy. The people who hated it are happy that it's gone. I don't really feel any other way. Oh yeah, like one of them was because he used AI images, but hey, he's just a kid, I guess. But I don't know.
Yeah. Like, so, like, full disclosure, Man in the Suit, it's not for me. Like, I watched it
I
and I was
like some
just,
ideas, but at the same time, I just don't like all the inaccuracies it has.
yeah. Like, it's not for me, but at the same time, like, it's just a kid that's making some fan content, right? And so there was I think that this ties into a lot of the things that we've already talked about, like people's inability to just walk away from things they don't like, from people who just like feel the need to be so negative, so overtly negative. But
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
because they see Man in the Suit, because I know it's like when they see videos like of the old Godzilla behind the scenes or talking about the old movies with Suitmation. It's like you'll see people in the comments like, "Oh, it's the Man in the Suit," and like they think the Man in the Suit ruined everything. They ruined Godzilla for them. It's like it has to. They have to have a scapegoat for everything, and it's like they're everything has to be blaming someone else because they ruined whatever it is that they are emotionally attached to. And to me, the only way to get by in life is by saying you don't like this thing because it sucks and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, emotionally get attached to the things that you love, that embrace you. That doesn't mean that you can't have negativity, but having too much negativity and having it be your whole vendetta against everything online and just in
Mm-hmm.
general is just not good. It doesn't do any good for you. It doesn't do good for anyone else, and it just drags everyone else down.
Yeah.
And that's something that people should have done with the man in the suit. But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
this is just a learning lesson for people if they're willing to listen to this, or anyone else that's
Sure.
willing to say it.
Yeah, I like if driving like a 15-year-old kid, pushing him over the edge to the point where he genuinely attempts to take his own life, if that is not a wake-up call to like maybe try to not be such a toxic piece of shit online, like I don't know what is. I truly am at a loss. Like what is the other thing? What is the next most intense thing that gets people to like maybe reflect and take a minute before you say
I guess
something?
gooning. It's either be negative or goon.
Yeah, that there's two states of being.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's just depression gooning,
Or depression while gooning.
I guess.
So I think the man in the suit like ties into a lot of the things we've talked about. I also think that it's and there was someone on Discord, I think their name is Mosumi, who put this together very much more eloquently than I'm going to say it. But they were saying that the man in the suit is a classic case of like how the young human mind is not built for popularity and like
Mm-hmm.
fame, I guess, or infamy, depending on how you look at it. And how this was just a person who likes Godzilla, made this like thought, oh, I want to make like this little cute not cute, but it's this little analog horror short, and maybe some people will see it and maybe they'll like it, and it just explodes overnight to become this huge, massive thing that all of a sudden millions of pairs of eyes are on it, and a lot of it is good comments, a lot of it is like, "What the hell is this?" Right? Like that takes a toll on a person. Like, I don't know what your experience has been like online, Rick. Well, I know a little bit, but like, I like to think that you and I, if we get a nasty comment thrown at us, we can bear it, but there's still a moment where you're kind of like, oh, that doesn't feel good, right?
I've had a lot of stuff like that, especially I've had my experiences, a lot of personal stuff, so I won't get into that, but I have no doubt that's going to do a huge toll on someone like Unknowingly, especially
Right?
at his age.
Like 15, and if you go back to like 2023, potentially 13,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
13.
that is insane that somebody would be subject to that much attention in such a short span of time, and that people would go further knowing a year and a half later that he's a minor, that he's a young kid, and still throw this vitriol his way.
Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, but he can't hide behind the fact that he's underage and stuff, so we can criticize him. Like, some things he can, and it's not like he's hiding. It's just that he doesn't know any better, especially like emotionally and maturely.
Yeah, like again, I don't know about you, but I don't know if I was like fully developed in my brain until I was like maybe 25, maybe
Mm-hmm.
25, right? Like he was 13 or 14, or he's 15. Like, holy shit.
If you don't like something, you gotta make sure that they understand that you don't like it.
It's like the Ricky Gervais skit about the guitar lessons. You ever seen that one?
No.
That joke where he's like, it's like a public flyer advertising guitar lessons, and so you snip the phone number off and you call the phone number just to tell them that you don't want guitar lessons instead of just moving on with your day.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
Humanity can be amazing and worse at the same time. There's no either way about it. Anything that something is created with noble intentions can always be ruined by someone for the wrong intentions. Like, they can make it something else, like a pencil. And then you have the John Wick scene from chapter 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You can use a knife to make your family dinner. You can use it to commit the worst crimes imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I definitely feel you there. Yeah. In these last few minutes, was there anything else you wanted to touch on today?
I'm not saying that you can't like have discussions or like look at things in an objective manner, like things that do happen in the movie, like intentions and everything. It's like ultimately at the end of the day, the conclusion that someone brings to it should be based on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, just you shouldn't take it so seriously to the point where it's always a superiority complex that people have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of a thing that's we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's just like the assertiveness, right? Like, I like to think that, how do I want to say this? I do believe in the things that I say online, that I share, but I don't want to be so arrogant as to assume that I'm always correct. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to having conversations with folks, and I'm even open to having my mind changed. Like, I don't mind chatting with someone who has a different opinion with me, and I think you don't mind that either, as long as it's respectful and healthy.
If everyone agreed on the same thing, it would be boring.
Yes. You're
Sure,
absolutely
there's
right.
always like a like system to like define everything, but no, it's never going to be perfect. Like we could try to be perfect, but ultimately at the end of the day, we are creatures that share our experiences and communicate through expression.
Mm-hmm.
And that expression can be biased. And
Sure.
biasm, it there is like a level where you should like hold it and like look at everything before you say something.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's more nuance to it than just the everything I say is right, or like everything according objectively is I say is right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a middle that I don't think people are willing to see because it's too much effort, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately it becomes very philosophical at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately that's kind of what this whole thing is, that it is just the emotional response to how people communicate and consume this type of stuff and how they react accordingly to it. And a lot of the stuff that I bring up is just not mature and not healthy
Mm-hmm.
and should be something that's changed. I wish more Godzilla YouTubers that I wish I can talk to can bring this to the attention, because I feel like if more people, including the larger YouTubers that have influence, can say that, I feel like we would at least make a difference in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Good. Good stuff. Well, here, I'm just gonna end this